Stop hoarding. Stop doing it. It's ridiculous. It's un-Australian, and it must stop.
Well, here we go again, and it's amazing how much has changed in just a few weeks. And it was only a few weeks back I did a bit of a study of what was going on in the retail space in the city where I live, which is Sydney, Australia, far, far away from the rest of the world, although we are not immune. I'm going to have to be extremely careful what I say in this video. Remembering we are looking at retail space, we're talking about what goes on in shops. That's the focus here. I'm a person who does Google reviews, done that for nearly 2 years now, and I'm going to use those pictures to help tell a story here. And if you don't know me on YouTube, I'm a person who quite often looks at certain brands of toys, and I like going in and looking at empty peg or empty shelf syndrome. Often that's caused by a breakdown in the supply chain or some fairly ratty ordering. Sometimes the demand for something can exceed the supply, and I think that's what goes on with the Thomas toys all the time. Because they're so popular, they're never on the shelves. Well, not at least where I live. But it seems like this style of retail fail has gone completely viral and is now affecting everything. And maybe we can consider this as a fairly rare event. This may be one of those once in 100 year events, and that's why I'm very curious and taking a look at what's going on. It's been 2 weeks since I did the other retail study of what was being sold, and I also spoke about what was not being sold, which I thought was very curious, but things have radically changed. I was getting a number of messages on my phone from people that I know, and they were sending me pictures of what was going on in some retail space, and I thought, wow, I can't believe this. I'm seeing whole areas basically totally empty within store. And they weren't just empty for a short period of time. A lot of these areas were never ever being restocked. In the last retail study, I did take special note of what was going on in what I call the junk food area, and I did note that a lot of that was still sitting there. It wasn't being touched in the mad early panic that was going on in grabbing whatever is on the shelf. But what I notice now, 2 weeks later, is something totally different. So it looks like people are just grabbing the comfort food now, or grabbing everything, and I had a look at the Mexican area, and I like the Mexican area and the Mexi beans and whatnot, and that area was vastly different to what I saw 2 weeks ago, and that really said to me, wow, people are grabbing anything. From what I can see, every afternoon and into the evening, there are trolleys that come out from the stock that's come off the back of the trucks that supply these stores. But whatever they send to the stores, it's never enough because by the next day you go back to being empty shelves again. That's just how crazy it's become. At my local supermarket, I'm seeing the car park packed at 7 in the morning. They have started a special time for 1 hour for elderly people to go and do their shopping. Then there's a second queue of people at 8 o'clock for the rest of us to go and find whatever is not on the shelves. And there's lots and lots of reports on the radio, people talking about the problems of what they're not finding. It feels like there's a war on. And maybe the only people who would remember something like this, they would be elderly people, people up in their 80s and 90s, and they would have experienced a very similar thing during World War II. But for most people in Australia, we've never seen activity like this. We've never seen supermarkets stripped bare of anything for sale. And there has been this complete and utter fascination with trying to acquire the paper product that comes in a white roll. It's got little white sheets, has the initials TP. I can't say the word on YouTube or else it will go silly on me. That has been near impossible to get since February 29, when my wife said to me, out of a curious conversation, I couldn't find any TP at Costco. Little did we know what was coming in the next weeks, because it has been one of the items that has been the real focus. It seems like everyone has this desire to hoard and store as much TP as they possibly can, and in all this crisis, nobody has been able to work out why this is going on. Maybe if you're a person studying human psychology and you're at university, you could do a thesis on this whole manic TP purchasing, hoarding and storing. You could possibly spend a lifetime trying to understand what was going on there. If you lived in Australia, you could pull a government grant in doing this study, because that's how silly we are in Australia. And maybe just to remind ourselves what these shops looked like before the manic hit is I'll steal my own Google review photos and I can show them here. Okay, you would have been seeing them as I'm babbling here. And it's almost like I've forgotten this is what retail space looks like. This is the norm. And the new norm is, well, you can see what the new norm is. And if I juxtapose what used to be versus what we see today, it's actually fairly shocking footage. It's very scary when you see it like that. I think the way I see this, and this is my opinion on this manic shopping spree, is the more I hear the government say, do not do this, this and this, the more reactive the people are and do the exact opposite. I keep hearing the Prime Minister of Australia, a gentleman called ScoMo, he keeps saying, don't panic buy, it's silly. Maybe I've got a clip of that or maybe I don't.
On bulk purchasing of supplies. Stop hoarding. I can't be more blunt about it. Stop it. It's not sensible. It's not helpful. Stop doing it. It's ridiculous. It's un-Australian and it must stop.
And every time people hear that, I am certain the exact opposite happens. We're also in an environment where there's this very different feel with social media. It's been around for about 12 years and the way people communicate, it's very instant now. And I'll also say this, that the mainstream media has been extremely clickbaity on this subject matter as well. It's been headlining now for days and days. Other things have been going on which are like really newsworthy and they've been completely buried by what I classify really silly reporting, which is only making things worse and worse. Anyway, just like the other video, I want to hear what's going on where you live in your part of the world. I did read all the comments from the previous video. I did reply to many of those as well. Because when we start to understand what's going on in other countries, maybe it's the shape of things to come for you. And I think that's very important to know because I learned a lot of things by seeing those secret videos that the Japanese vloggers were putting in mid-video because they're being very careful in what they were explaining and saying, like I have to be very careful in this video as well. And for us in Australia, winter is coming. It's feeling like the tip of a very, very large and scary iceberg. I am really looking forward to next summer. It's very interesting times indeed, and if you like studying retail space, which is what this video is all about, wow, it's a bonanza. If you're thinking the solution to avoiding all the empty shelves in store is to have a home delivery or click and collect, well, Houston, we have a problem there. Many of those services have been cancelled or shut down, and let me just read one of the notices here. It says, due to significant item shortages, our pickup service is unavailable until further notice. If you place a delivery order, you will have a high level of out of stocks, especially if they are pantry or cleaning items or TP. I can't say the word. We apologise for any inconvenience this may cause. It was astonishing to hear that the online side of retail was being halted for a while. I can go into a store and I can see an empty shelf, but when you start hearing the same going on something you can't see, that is online sales, wow, it's really saying something. It's a complete breakdown of the supply chain logistics that goes on that we all take for granted when it works all the time. But at the moment, it's not working at all. I did hear someone in retail space explain it to me like this, and they said their store was like Christmas Eve shopping every day, and it doesn't stop. It is quite crazy. Oh yes, I should have said this right at the start of the video, but I'll say it at the end. None of the pictures or video that you see in this little retail study has been altered or photoshopped to make it look any better or worse than what it really is. Just remember, Mr. Google, retail study. Retail study.
Stop doing it. It's ridiculous. It's un-Australian and it must stop.